Great to have you all join us once again for a new Dairy Café, Vesper's bi-weekly effort to keep you updated on what's happening in the dairy markets. I'm joined today by Jasper, our in-house analyst, and his trusty sidekick, Seb, our marketplace man. Great to have both of you on the call today. How are you guys doing?
Thanks, Feiko. Yeah, we're good. We're good.
doing well.
Both had a little break in Switzerland and in the mountains, and now back in our flat country, the Netherlands.
See what all this mountain air will do for the topics today. Jasper, what are we going to cover?
I think it's good to do a quick latest update. We've skipped one Dairy Café, so it's been a while. Do a quick recap of everything that's been going on. It is the holiday break for many of us here in Europe. So on the trade activity side, it might not be much, but definitely we see plenty happening on pricing. And secondly, I think it's good to we start looking at the New Zealand milk season already. We're in August already, so that means that we are picking up steam. And I think there's some indicators that we can use or look at to kind of predict what's going to be coming from Oceania, or at least from New Zealand, our way. And I think they'll be the most interesting topics for today.
Super clear. And Sebi, despite the holidays, marketplace still going strong?
Yeah, we've actually had a record-breaking week. I think it was last week or the week before that. This week as well, we had two SMP deals. So the last 3 weeks have actually been quite active. Surprisingly, I must say, as I had expected a bit more of the buyers being on holidays. But it does feel like, because there's a bit of a bearish sentiment, some volumes are being covered, which is a good sign. But I think we'll come back to the supply and demand, and I'll try to analyze what Jasper is saying with what we've been seeing on the marketplace, which I think is actually quite in alignment with what Jasper is seeing. So I think it's
perfect. In that case, we'll just take it away.
Sounds like a 1-2. No pressure. So looking at the latest price development in the European market, also let's take the US and Oceania in this case into account. If we look at the global picture, I think the butterfat market is actually feeling slightly weaker. We're not breaking through a lot of the support levels that we've seen for the last few months. So still, European butter still hovering around 7, still very expensive. US butter has become a little bit more expensive in euro terms, but because the currency exchange rate is also changing, I feel like all these markets have been moving mostly sideways. Mm-hmm. We'll discuss a little bit on the GDT later that happened yesterday, but overall kind of sideways with a slightly weaker tone. I think it's definitely something that we've seen develop, and it's not breaking the market if we consider Europe, for example, but it's definitely pushing.
No, completely. That's indeed exactly what we've been seeing on the marketplace as well. Some deals have been done around the 7,000 mark and even under that. But it's still not going down as fast as people thought it was going to. A couple of weeks ago, our latest one that we had, was it a month ago? We expect it was a very bearish tone, but it actually, surprisingly, prices have been holding up quite stable. I think the reason for that is the demand. Is there still some demand? Mm-hmm. And I think that sellers are expecting buyers to come back in the market, and they don't want to sell right now, knowing that the market is going to be up. So I think there is more availability, but saying that, they're not ready to really drop their prices because they still believe that demand is still has to be covered.
Yep,
if that's the truth, that is something to be seen. But often it is true that we're seeing normally a bit of a bounce back towards end of August. So sellers are not in a hurry to do anything. No. They are, of course, taking some and at least selling some of their volumes, but it's very, very little.
Yep, I feel we're definitely on the same page here. And what I found interesting there's also one thing I have to get used to. We're doing this on a Wednesday just before the VPI is published, so we're currently dealing with last week's prices as our latest VPI, but the next one will be on our way. And indeed, it didn't fall that much, primarily because it will only fall if offers are really moving lower as well. We definitely see buyers moving lower. They really want to kind of use this weaker sentiment to get cheaper deals in. But you need a seller for that, and at the moment they don't really jump just yet. It might be that after the summer breaks or in a couple of weeks' time, we see more sellers coming back because they realize, oh, the buyers are not really coming back the way we hoped they would.
Yeah.
But that remains to be seen.
Indeed. For the moment, it's not a trend that has been, it's a small trend, but they're waiting a month to see, okay, is this trend actual? Is it due to holiday period, or is it really due to a lack of consumption and a real decrease in consumption, which will be a longer term effect with prices really decreasing further in September?
Yep.
So it's a bit of a wait and see game for the moment.
Yeah,
especially in butter.
I think if we jump to the next product that I wanted to mention was actually 𝗂𝗲𝗏. For butter, if there's no demand, it's a pity, but it's no real problem just yet. You can freeze butter, you can store butter, it's easier to store. You can't really store cheeses that easily. The age just gets older every day, you would always say. So what we see is that on the cheese market, there's a little bit more pressure to sell. That doesn't mean that the latest pricing, it's 408 now, but looking at all the latest pricing that we see, it should be slightly lower than this level already this week for spot volumes. That doesn't mean that hundreds of tons are being traded at a time at those lower price levels, but it does mean that the few tons that are traded simply need to be at a lower price, otherwise a buyer won't be interested. So while that problem for butter with no buyers being active or few buyers being active, it's not really an issue for butter, it is an issue for cheese. So that's why we see 𝗂𝗏𝗏, cheddar, Emmental has also definitely dropped significantly in price over the past few weeks. Those products are actually moving down significantly faster than other products. So now we saw in 2 weeks' time, it's a drop of €200, and this week it will drop even further because we definitely see a weaker trend.
Yeah, quite sharp. We also have some news actually on the marketplace on that side. We will be adding cheeses very soon, so we'll also be able to bring a bit more transparency into those prices. We'll probably start with mozzarella and 𝗂𝗏𝗏 within by the end of the month. Something like that, 1st of September. So we'll have more news over the coming weeks, and we'll publish more things. But the marketplace will also be available for our cheese buyers.
Good to hear. And I think we've already mentioned on the marketplace, we have seen some trade for SMP.
Yeah.
Interestingly, and these are a bit too many prices at the same time, we'll focus on Europe first. We actually saw an increase in prices for SMP. And well, we'll talk about what happened in the marketplace in a little bit. But I think what's really interesting here is that we saw that global competition for SMP was really starting to hurt the European market. We needed to go lower and lower and lower in price because our euro was very strong. And we had the trade deal between the US and EU roughly 10 days ago. That was agreed upon in Scotland. That's when the exchange rate turned. So the euro weakened, the US dollar gained strength, and immediately the European SMP price went up, because we could basically ask the same price in dollars, but still ask a higher price in euros. So for the internal European market, that was good news. That's why we really saw prices push up. It wasn't additional demand. It wasn't that there was no supply. All of a sudden, nothing fundamentally happened other than the exchange rate that really moved.
Yeah, completely. But that had an impact on European buyers as well.
Yeah.
Because they're seeing the market going up. That's also what we saw 2 weeks ago, for example, buyers that would put a certain bid on and not accepted the counters that they would receive because they deemed it too high, were actually closed a couple weeks later, 2 weeks later. So there's clearly a bit of a shift in terms of sentiment here of, okay, it is a good price. It seems to be fair between the, if it's a delivered price between the 245 and 255, depending on where it's delivered.
Yep.
And of course the time of the month, if it's for September or if it's later in the year. So there was clearly a bit of a shift where we see that prices have actually been closed compared to a couple of weeks ago.
Yep. Yeah, that's quite interesting, because sometimes you expect something to change fundamentally on the supply side or demand side, but that really is okay, and demand has been structurally worse, or something really changes to push prices up. But in this case, it's actually just one side of the market that immediately shoots up because the price of the offer has changed.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, in this case, it's almost the other way around, you would say.
Yeah, and I've also heard that, sellers are also hopeful for the moment that there's still some demand to be covered. Some big buyers haven't fully covered a lot of their positions for Q3, Q4. But once again, that is something that's more speculative. It's not something that is for certain.
Yep.
Maybe they are covered. but that's what I've been hearing. So that's also a bit maybe why there is a switch in sentiment and why sellers aren't really dropping their prices.
Yep.
They're just holding steady because they're hoping for more demand.
But that's also what we saw in the marketplace this week, and also a little bit of last week. The volumes that we saw for trades on S&P were actually quite significant.
Yeah, indeed. And the reason for that was mostly exports. There was some big deal. I think it was last week, indeed. There was almost 600 tons traded. There was more than 600 tons traded through the platform just on S&P. The reason for that was simply because we were more attractive on the export world, and it was a good price, and people could export it for a good price. So we saw quite a bit of demand coming in the market within a time period. But that's mostly due to what you said, due to the exchange rate being favorable for us.
And I think that's before I really want to highlight some whey products as well before we move on to the second part of our story. But it's definitely the exchange rate that's been pushing several prices. And of course, not every product is a global market or is operating in a global market. But this is what we saw happening the days after the trade negotiations and the trade deal between the European Union and the US actually got agreed upon. So from 117.5, we dropped all the way to 114.1. But as easy as that, we've already went back up to 1.15 high. And actually, if you look at the latest values all the way at the bottom left, you can actually see that these are updated every few minutes.
Yeah,
we're already back in 116. So it seems like the advantage or like the slightly higher prices that we could ask in euro terms, I'm not going to say it's behind us, but these things are incredibly volatile.
Yeah.
And this is only proving that, these might be really, really small windows of opportunity. You need to make use of them. If you are able to export at slightly higher value in terms of euros, while it's the same in dollars, do it, make use of it. And then later,
it's a very, I feel like, I mean, Feiko can probably testify for that, but it's a very reactive market. It moves very fast due to tariffs one way being accepted. There's a lot of deals that still haven't been done. So I think it is probably a trend that we're going to see over the coming months. Would you agree, Feiko?
Do you think, Jasper, that now we're going to a phase where we have more clarity, not clarity that everybody's happy with? The Swiss will say that they're very unhappy with the clarity that they've received, and the Brazilians will say the same. But we are going to the phase with, more clarity. It's still a volatile situation, and we've seen a lot of last-minute change from the current administration. But do you think that with more clarity, it actually benefits the U.S. export position? So people not having to be unsure about a possible trade argument starting all of a sudden. There's been some important deals made, and nobody has said, okay, we're going to respond, so we're going to tariff the U.S. Just yet. Europeans have taken it, the 15%. I think most countries are saying, okay, hey, we'll take a bit of a hike. It's mostly detrimental for the U.S. Consumer anyway, and we're not going to respond to it and make the conflict bigger. Do you think this is going to help buyers come back to U.S. So that they might have been holding off on despite being more favorable in price?
I think to be very precise in my answer, I think the additional clarity comes more from the lack of reciprocal tariffs. So the fact that barely any other countries say, outside of China, for example, say, okay, US, if you're going to be tariffing us, we will be tariffing you. That's really going to be affecting the dairy market. So I think that there is less uncertainty, so to say, in what could other countries possibly do. And I think that's from the start, that was what we were focusing on. I mean, it would be very detrimental for the global market if Mexico decides to tariff US on their dairy products. Mm-hmm. Those are the type of things that we were scared of. And it seems like that's not necessarily going to take place. So that takes away some of the uncertainty. But I think, but next to that, I think that's only one part of the story. I think a very big other part of the story is, for example, exchange rates. You've been talking about it all day already. So all Dairy Café already. Import tariffs are a big part of that, but it's not just import tariffs. It's also how the interest rates are doing in certain countries, how other trade deals are taking or shaping up. There's so many moving pieces on the board. It is really hard to really say, okay, this. will create or make it more easy to trade with the US right now, because it might not even be favorable to do business with the US because of the currency exchange rate. We don't know. So yeah, I think there is less uncertainty. I think that's a good thing. The less uncertainty
Doesn't mean less volatility though.
Exactly. I think there's 20,000 other things that could lead to a volatile dairy market or oil market or whatever other markets we concern. So I feel it's not enough to turn the page if you consider global dairy markets.
Thanks for that. On to whey specialties.
There's a couple of whey products I wanted to mention. On one hand, starting with 𝗃𝗁𝗰𝗵𝗂𝗁𝗃. This product is also very export dependent if you look at the European market, also for the US. But just like SMP, we also saw the same as whey. So the offers moved up significantly, or a few percent in a matter of a few days, simply because the exchange rate is more favorable. So we could ask a higher price in euro terms while still having the same dollar price. So people did. So that's why we saw a small spike on regular whey powder. But at the same time, the whey protein markets are really I wouldn't say on fire, but they're starting to tighten a little bit again. We have Q4 coming up, which is usually the tightest quarter for whey proteins. A lot of the Q1 consumption is bought in Q4 so that all the products can be produced. And that means that 6 weeks before that Q4
when things are
starts,
moving.
and then is when the market starts to move. And that 6 week window is roughly in 2 weeks or so. So we're starting to see that more people are anticipating, okay, what might be happening? Could we see prices increase or decrease? And based on the recent across the board increase in protein consumption, we see that we're already creating a slightly tighter market, and we're adding that seasonal pattern on top. It's looking to create quite a tight market for whey proteins. And as we are already, I think if we look at the 3 years price movement of WPC, we are already at very high levels. So don't get me wrong, the expectation is not that we will move up to $16, $17, $18 a ton for whey protein all of a sudden. But it does seem like lowering prices like we kind of anticipated early in this year. We had a lot of additional US production, for example, and we hoped that would find its way to the global market. It's not really happening. And we're seeing that additional consumption of all those products is creating such a strong level of support. It's kind of hard to break. And also 𝗿𝗵𝗆, same thing. We are seeing that market is slightly tightening again. There have been some supply issues. And that's leading to, I wouldn't say a shortage. It's not as bad that we really see prices spike again, but we are seeing that it's just tight again.
Yeah, so the price are probably going to hold on those high levels.
Yeah.
We can expect that.
And for both 𝗿𝗍, but also for lactose, for example, we see also that the price difference between the US and EU is very, very big. And that also leads to not just European-US trade, because I think based on the current tariffs, and Feiko, I think this is an example of why your question regarding import tariffs, it does create some certainty. We know that these trade lanes are now open. If you know that the Europe won't be tariffing US products even more than they are doing today, you know what you can import US products into Europe for. So there is a small spread that you can work with, and we do feel like to a certain degree that will be used. But the whey protein side still, it never fails to amaze us in these years.
No, indeed.
We've gotten a question from the chat, maybe before we head on to New Zealand. And that's a question about lumpy skin disease. So there's been occurrences in both France and Italy. How is it unfolding? Is it contained, or is there a risk of a further spread?
The risk of a further spread will always be there. At the moment, it seems to be doing okay. I think Italy and France, indeed, we had some documented cases. I actually already had the milk production numbers for France lined up. I wouldn't say just in case, but it's very coincidentally. At the moment, we're actually seeing that the latest milk production numbers, which are all uploaded all the way until the end of July, are really good. So I have the feeling, and this is not based on how the scientific impact of lumpy skin disease is on cows, I have the feeling that it's quite well contained, and even though there will always be a risk of spread, it won't impact the milk production numbers that much.
Yeah, for the moment, and from what I've read as well, haven't heard of any spreading of the cases, and it's still contained within the few farms where it was found.
Yep.
So
it's I think to answer the question more specifically, let me read it again. It is quite well contained, or it seems to be quite well contained, and the impact on milk production isn't that big as it is right now, especially in France. The risk to spread further, I think that's a hard one to tell. We hope it doesn't spread. I think for the entire dairy market, but also specifically for the farmers involved, that's definitely something that we hope won't take place. But that will at least it's not something that we know at the moment.
Clear. And what about down under?
Down under.
Talk a lot about Europe, but I think this milk production is starting to move fast down south.
Yeah, I think it's one thing that we really want to indicate is that New Zealand actually is playing a bigger and bigger role in the global dairy market because they keep exporting more. They grow in milk production, at least the past couple of years. And as you can see, it's a very seasonal pattern. And August is the part where we really see that solids and also milk production.
Yeah, and referring to this, I think that they can still improve the milk output per cows.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that they've also, I think we're going to touch upon that. But with feed, etc., there's quite a bit of things they can do in terms of increase of milk production compared to what we're doing already here. So I think that's also why they will play a bigger role over the coming years.
I think to put it into numbers, I think they are roughly at 40% of the yield that the European or US cow produces. So there's still significant increases that we can make. We are seeing that some, and it's mostly because of the pasture-based system versus additional feeding or power feed, as we like to call it in Dutch. But there's plenty of room to grow, and I think. Ultimately, milk production comes down to several things, but the number of cows is very important, and we see that the total herd size in New Zealand is actually been very, very good. So previous years, and I'll actually click away most of the years. So 2024, we saw the yellow line is actually above the blue line all the way until the second half. From the second half of 2024 and the start of 2025. So the 2024-2025 season was really, really good. We had more cows. The milk price was actually quite high because all the commodity prices were doing good. And we also saw that next to the pasture-based feeding, that is usually the bottom line in New Zealand, there was also a lot of palm kernel that's being fed.
Imported.
Yeah, it's being imported. They don't grow palm kernel in New Zealand. Unfortunately, they get it from either Indonesia or Malaysia. But we discussed this with Stu from High Ground and Dairy Café as well.
I think that's where as well the tool can be very interesting. Is all that data is also available for everybody. You can easily check import data from New Zealand to see, hey, are they importing more or less? If they're importing more, that's a good sign. Of milk production.
Yep, and I think the Stu ended to see that basically ended the milk season or the last season, saying that the dairy herd size is big, and as long as the milk price was at the level that they had back then, we should be looking at a good upcoming season. Well, at the moment we saw, and that's quite interesting, at least what I found interesting over the past couple of months, Oceanian whole milk powder is by far the most determinant factor for the milk price in Oceania and also New Zealand. So if we just look at what's been happening, we did see that the milk price was relatively good at the end of May, throughout May, because whole milk powder prices were high. But then we started seeing whole milk powder prices drop in certain weeks, and we could also see that on the GDT event. Prices were actually much lower than $4,000 a ton, slightly, but not much, but a couple $100 lower. So there were, I wouldn't say concerns, but that means that the milk price was going to be lower than the opening forecast of $10 per kilogram of milk solids. And that kind of led us to believe, okay, the milk season might not be as good as we ended 24-25. The 25-26 season might not start as good. But this week on the GDT event, we actually saw that the price of whole milk powder for sheet 2, and I'll look it up on the go, actually rose. And yes, the offered volumes increased, but also the price increased. So now we're actually back above the $4,000 a ton mark. And this is kind of roughly the point where we see that $10 per kilogram of milk solids. That's a good payout price, a high payout price. We will have a good milk season. So if we stay above that 4,000 mark for whole milk powder, we should be looking at quite a good season in the 2025-2026 New Zealand milk season. So at the moment, actually quite some positive notes
for the milk season.
Yeah.
So what we'll say there is they have a good payout price.
Yep.
There's a lot of feed coming in. I think we can easily look at it either at a palm kernel price or we can look at the import pricing for palm kernel, but it is up and prices are under control. Are there any other factors that we're looking at that are not favorable currently for farmers in New Zealand?
I think that there's two other factors that always play a role, and a big one there is weather. I think because of the pasture-based system, it really depends on good weather. And on one hand, that's doing good. So we do see that the weather so far has been okay, but it's winter time now, so this is not necessarily the most pressing time. Where of course weather conditions have an influence now as well. But at the moment, it seems to be pointing in the right direction.
Yeah, this is something we're going to watch a lot more closely around the September-October mark. The pasture index growth, how is the soil there? Is it too wet? Of course, we're going to hear some more things from people that are based there. But for the moment, it doesn't have a massive impact. We're still at the very beginning of the milk season.
Yep.
So I think from all the information we have, it looks promising, but that doesn't mean that that's going to turn out to be a great season. But yeah, it's a good start for milk output.
Yeah, and I think that the second thing we'd like to mention, and I'll be kind of quick on that one. We do see that milk production it will likely be good in New Zealand. It's actually relatively good in Europe, even though some of the absolute volumes are not up. We see that solids are up. US is doing good. Latin America, that's actually also doing really, really good on milk production numbers. So the total supply of dairy is growing. And even though we've yet to see if this will be really sustainable for the long time, for the long term. If that stays well, ultimately, if supplies are high, we know what that's going to do to the price.
It could completely. I think the biggest question is consumption. Can consumption follow? We've seen that, especially with the market prices that we've witnessed over the last month, it does seem like consumption take a step back as soon as it hits those record levels. So yeah, let's see how this plays out. But it does seem like we are having a really good year in terms of milk production in the world, not just Europe.
Well, I think on that bombshell, it's a good time to round up. I think if I summarize, and please interrupt me if I don't summarize as well, Jasper, that we're currently looking at a holiday market. Things have slowed down, but there is a distinct belief with sellers that there is more demand that still needs to be covered. We're going to need to see in the coming weeks whether they are correct and about the size of it, not only if there's still demand, but also how big is the demand. So that means we're seeing some retraction on butter and skim, which are easier to hold on to. Well, we see cheese prices already dropping as they need to go to the market sooner. And I think if we then shift to New Zealand, we see that there's a lot of favorable circumstances there, leading to us to at least a good start or outlook on the start of the season, and yet to see exactly how it unfolds.
Exactly. Good summary.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, beautiful. Thanks so much, guys. See you in 2 weeks' time. Back on a Thursday.
Yeah. See you guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.